Well, hi, engn1220. Another video for another CAD assignment. I guess this is CAD assignment number 4. And what we're going to do in this assignment is take and carry along or carry forward with what you just worked on last week with CAD assignment 3, where you made that box. Well, now we're going to actually add some features to the box and look at the details of it, try to make it realistic so it's something that you could really 3D print and it would work. What we're going to end up with this series of assignments is an actual part that when you start making some components for your prototyping in a couple of weeks, you're probably going to want to dig up this file, this box, make some modifications to it, improve it, and then you will 3D print it, and you will actually make it into something that you can use. So let's get started. So I'm going to open up from where I left off, but I'm going to start with the assembly. Recall at the end of the last assignment, I had you assemble the parts. So this was from, to follow the workflow, a box that you made first by making just a simple, cube solid or something, but then you split it, which was kind of weird. And you made 2 split parts out of that so that the outside shape is kind of consistent. Well, then because we'd made 2 separate files that were split, they really are 2 different parts, even though they're connected through the original solid part. So we had to reassemble them, and it's the reassembled part where we can go in and add some features and things, because we'd like to add some features that are related to each other. And in fact, you could even bring in components like electronic components and actually insert the physical electronic components into the box and make it actually fit. Now, we're not going to do that in this assignment, but we are going to drill some holes, make some standoffs, make some things that will allow this box to be 3D printed and actually used. So here we are with the complicated box. Now don't worry about the fact I'm using the one that has the curvy sides that I showed in the extra video last week. This one, it's the same if you've got the flat face. I just kind of like this better. But the fact that it had a flat face is irrelevant. Now, first thing, we'll go and just have a look at the mates that I did to join these things together. I used the outer surface here, and you can see it's highlighted. Let me see if I can show that in a different display style. There we go. So it's highlighted with that face on the top and that face on the bottom. So those are coincident, meaning that they're parallel, or if you looked at it in the vertical, you would see that they line up exactly. And my other mating face was the same type outside face parallel. But if I did that, I'm just going to suppress this third mate. I could take this box and I could just move it up and down, and that's nonsensical. So I needed a third thing to mate. Now, there's lots of things you could use. Because I made the curvy surface there, that's a bit harder to use as a mate, so it actually clicks into place. So I just used those 2 lines. And if I unsuppress it, it's back together. So I used those, just simply 2 lines on the edge. And my mate feature was, I said that they are 0.1 inches apart, 0.1 millimeters apart. Now I could take that and I could make that 0.25. And so the mate has changed. And maybe I think that that's a more realistic gap, because nothing's perfect. That's a 1/4 millimeter offset. This is a small box, and a 1/4 millimeter accuracy for the part you're going to 3D print is pretty realistic, actually. So it's not a perfectly mated line, but it does represent what you really will build. So I'm going to leave it like that. Now, if I just suppress that mate again for the moment, and I slide this up and down, one of the things you notice with this box is that really, if I build it, and I fit it together, there's nothing holding it together. And that could be a problem. I'm just going to use that mate again. And I'm going to show these with the hidden lines. So there's a couple of things that I've done here when I built this. And I didn't talk about this in the last video, but I will now. Now, I built this bit so that, I'll suppress that again, so that you see that the inner plug piece that slides into the other bit is a bit smaller than its outer shell. So that if I look at this face here versus the face that it mates with in there, slides in, there's going to be a gap. Now the easiest way to show that, and I did a little bit of this in the last video, was to show a cross section. So I'm just going to click the cross section tool, and I'm going to drag my cross section back so it actually cuts through the part. And you can see that what I've got here is a part that has this gap. So that's going to not stick together. So I need some kind of a fastening that's going to hold it in place. If I'm going to close this box, I kind of want it to stay closed, but I also want it to not be impossible to open again too. So there's a bunch of things I could do. Regardless, this is a matter of getting into the details, getting into the weeds of designing and building a real thing. And the nice thing about learning the CAD tools is it enables you to actually design a part that's real and can be made with whatever level of detail you're willing to put in it. In my case now, let's see, what are the options I could use? I could take this part and I could drill a hole through it, and I could put a screw into the side to hold it together. But you know, that's going to be kind of ugly. I don't really want to do that. I think what I will do is I'm going to make a tab, a little bit of a bump. So I'm just going to hide this bit. And I can do that by going over to the left and right-clicking on that. And if I click Hide Components, that bottom piece is out of my way for a moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a spot on this face, and I'm going to do an extrusion. Now notice that I'm still in assembly, but one of the cool things about this is after you've got parts that are fairly complete and evolved and kind of the way you want it, it's actually really convenient to, in assembly, make some additions to it. So what I'm going to do in this assembly is I'm going to select the box top over on the left, and some of these tools over here enable me to do some more non-assembly things. I could open the part directly, and that will open the part file that this is as a separate part file. I could open the part in position, which is nice if you're trying to look at the interface with one part versus another and still edit it. I'm just going to edit the part. So that's within the SolidWorks assembly environment. I'm going to directly edit that part. And when I do that, you'll notice that there's this little icon up in the right-hand corner of the edit window, which shows that I'm actually editing a part, even though I started out I'm in the assembly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm just going to I don't want to edit the sketch there, sorry. I'm not going to do that. I'm going over here to Features, and I'm going to make an extruded base. And I'm going to do it on that face. So now you'll notice that now I'm in Sketch. So that little sketch dialog is there. It's easy to forget what you're doing in this because the window didn't change, just this little icon in the upper right-hand corner changed. So pay attention to that. Within this sketch, I'm just going to take and I'm going to draw a circle and like so. Now that circle maybe I'll have it someplace where I want to put it. So I'm probably going to want to dimension it. I'm going to click the center and there. Maybe I'll make that 6 millimeters up from the edge. And I'll make it pick from there. I'll make it 25 millimeters from that face. And the other thing I'm going to want to dimension is the diameter. It's 6.5, I'll make it 5 millimeters. There, little dimple. And I'm going to extrude that, let me see, by 0.5 millimeter, maybe 0.7 millimeters. You can play around with that and see whatever makes sense. Yeah, 0.7. And there, it's created that dimple, but I'm going to go and just make a couple of edits to that. Now I could edit it if I click on the device and I'm in this rapid sketch business. I could actually edit it by changing those sketch dimensions on the fly, but that's not quite what I want to do. I'm going to highlight it, and I actually want to edit the way I created the feature. I'm going to add a draft to it. Now a draft is an angle at the base, so it'll be a bit tapered. I'm going to add a pretty hefty draft. I'll make it 20 degrees because I can remember that it's 20 degrees. And so what it makes is this dimple that has a draft to it. Now, I'm not quite done yet. I think I'm going to round that off. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to add a fillet to it, just a fillet to this bit. I don't want a 10 millimeter fillet. I probably want, a 0.5 millimeter fillet. Very small. Like so. So now I've got that little bump on the side. I could do that on the other side, on the end, and I could make multiple. But for the moment, I'm just going to show you that one. So I'm finished with that part for the moment. And this little stop sign, go sign, it's telling me that I can rebuild the rest of the parts around in the assembly. So if I click that, it'll rebuild, and you'll see that everything will update. Now I'm going to go to the other part, and that's the bottom piece. And on the bottom piece, I'm going to make a dimple for that bump that I just made. So I'm going to go into that bottom piece there. I believe that's the one. I called it box top. It's actually the bottom. I'm going to edit that part like I just did with the other one. And I am going to do an extruded cut. So it wants to select a face for the sketch for the extruded cut. And if I scroll over things, I'm not getting the face that I want. It wants to pick the exterior face, a bunch of things, and it's not actually selecting the face that I want it to pick. And so what you can do is scrolling over where you want to make the edit and right click, you'll see that there's this option here, right clicking for select other. And if you do use that, that will give you all of the possible options that might be what you're trying to do. Now I'm going to look for the face that I want. The face that I want is on the box top, so that's the bottom. It's not that one. It's not that one. It's not on the box bottom. It's not on the box bottom. Looks like it's that one on the simple box top. So I'm going to select that. And so now it's drawing on the inside of the cutaway. And if I look at this, I'm in sketch mode. I'm sketching the profile for the cut. I'm going to use this offset entities tool, and I'm going to pick the outer circle of the thing that I just made, and I'm going to have it offset by 0.5 millimeters. Very small. And you can see it showing me in yellow what that offset distance is going to be. And do I want it 0.5? Maybe I'll make it tighter than that. Maybe I'll make it 0.1. 0.2. This is something that you'll have to play around with, because ultimately it will be affected, what you need to use, by the parameters and the accuracy of the 3D printing you're using. So now I've got that circle, and that's what I actually want to cut out of the wall of my part. And it already thinks that I want to go 0.7 millimeters. Probably don't want to go that far. I think I'm only going to cut in there 0.4. There. Maybe not 0.4, 0.5. So I've cut in there. I'm also going to put a draft on that. And I'm going to do the 20-degree draft that I did with the other one. Oops, 20. There we go. And that's made a cut into this part that kind of mimics the other one. Now I'm also going to finish this up to be nice and neat and proper about it. I'm going to go to features, and I'm going to add a fillet, 0.5 millimeter fillet, and I'm going to select that edge. Boom. And so now what I've got is a dimple that matches kind of a bump on the other part. And if that dimple is small enough, then it will slide and then fit together. Now let's just have a look at the cross section there. That's not the cross section I want. Try that again. Cross section. And I don't want it on the front plane. I want it on, no, not the top plane. Yeah, that's the one that I want. And if you slide this around, eventually you'll, there it is. And there. So you can see with the cross section that what I've done is I've made this dimple something that when it clicks into place, it'll stay there, because you'll have to bend the wall out a little bit. Now this is where playing around with the details is helpful, because is that the right distance between that surface and that? Let's just see what that is. I'll use the evaluate tool, and I'll click measure, and I'll select that face and that face, and it's telling me that's 0.3 millimeters. So when I go to snap this thing together, then the walls of it have to flex out 1/3 of a millimeter. Doesn't seem like much. Not sure if that's going to be a good idea or if that's going to be too tight or too loose, but it's a start, and it's not a bad try. So I could go ahead and put some more of those around. For instance, I would probably want to put one on the inside of this face and on the opposite end, and that would give me enough locking tabs so that when I snap this thing together, it's going to be hard to pull apart. You don't want it to be too hard to pull apart, but reasonably so. Other ways I could do it would be having a complete ring around the part. But it would be the same approach in that you could make a depression in one side and a bump in the other side. So there I've started, and when you do your assignment, you finish this, carry on, and make enough other bumps that it would actually hold your part together. And you could leave it as it is on the outside, so that once it's clicked together, it's going to be really hard to get apart. Or if you wanted to, you could also take and cut a piece in the side that might be possible to pry it open. And so for that, I'm going to go and, oh, I think I'll cut it in this piece. I'm going to select that top or bottom piece, and I'm going to edit it. And now you can see once again, this little icon in the right-hand corner is showing me I'm editing. I'm going to make an extruded cut. The nice thing is once you've learned the basics, you can do anything with it. I'm just going to make a cut that is sort of like that. And I don't even know if that's the right dimension. I'm not even going to care. And now it wants to do the same thing I just did with the previous operation. It remembers that, but I don't want to use that. I don't only want to have a 0.5 millimeter cut. I'm actually going to cut that up to a surface. And the surface I'm going to choose would be, now here's where, once again, I can right click to select other, and it will give me choices as to what surfaces I'm going to cut through. I'm just going to cut to that surface. And so it does a cut right into that inner surface. Now, I'm not really crazy about these sharp corners, because whenever you make a plastic part, like a 3D printed part or a metal part, sharp corners create what are called stress concentrations. So before I'm finished with modifying this, I'm going to use a fillet, and I'm going to put a tiny little radius there, and there, and there, and there, and there. And there we go. And that's a realistic little notch to pry with a small pen or a screwdriver or who knows what, your thumb. That will help you get the part separated and be fairly unobtrusive. There's other ways to do it. It's adding these little details that are the difference between making something that's unrealistic and in fact not an actual device you can prototype versus making something that actually will work. And it's practice in understanding what are some of the clearances to use, that sort of thing, which depends upon your manufacturing method. If you're using 3D printing, some of these dimensions I'm showing in this are exactly, in the right ballpark. Now, one of the things that this device that we're making is going to be used for is for making a temperature monitor and a light level monitor, let's say. So I've got to cut some things into this box that will allow me to use it as such. So I'm going to cut some holes in the top of the box. I'm just going to hide that bit, and I just want to work on this piece. So I'm going to edit it. So I'm back into editing the part. I could do this by opening up the file directly. And I know that I've got a small LED-like circular part that's 3 millimeters in diameter. And I'm going to cut a hole in this top 3 millimeters in diameter, approximately where I expect it's going to be needed in my electronics. Now, if I had designed the circuit board and I was making it, I'd actually have that dimension. And in fact, I would probably have the circuit board as a part to model from. But I'm just going to pick the top plane. I'm going to pick a circular cut, and I'm going to do that. And before I'm finished, I'm going to use Smart Dimension, and I said I want it to be, it's a 3 millimeter, so I'm going to make it 3.2 millimeter diameter. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to cut. It's already moved to the cut extrude. I want it to be through everything on this particular part, so I'm going to go through all. I'm going to through all both. I could go just through all, and that's going to cut a hole all the way through. Now, I know that my LED is going to be a little different than this, so I'm actually going to go on the back side, and I'm going to have a recessed cut for it as well. So I'm going to cut it again on the back side. And again, I'm into a sketch tool. I'm going to pick, actually I'm going to use the offset. I'm going to pick offset entities. I'm going to pick that circle. I'm going to offset it by 1.5 millimeters. So I'm going to make a bigger hole like this so that my my little diode can fit through there and poke its head above the surface. And the depth of my cut, I'm going to go offset from surface. The surface I want to offset to is that one, and I want it to go 1 millimeter from that surface. There, and so you can see that I've cut this little well so that the hole is here and the inner cut will snap to it and give me a space to pop in my little electronic piece. And as I said before I'm done, I don't want to have any sharp corners in my plastic bit because the sharp corners are where things break. I'm going to put a radius on there, put a fillet on there, and that's a hole for the electronics. Now another part that I'm going to have is a humidity sensor. And so I do need a place for the air to come in and go out, because the humidity sensor needs to have contact with the outside air. And once again, I'm going to use an extruded cut on the top. I'm just going to select that top. And I'm in sketch mode again. I'm going to pick a rectangle, and I'm just going to draw that. Now this rectangle, I'm going to dimension it. I want it to be 10 millimeters long. Oops, not 100, 10 millimeters long, and I want it to be 1.5 millimeters. Whoops, that made a weird thing. I want this to be horizontal, and I want this to be vertical, and I want this to be vertical. And the vertical horizontal dimension is reference to the axes. So even though I'm looking at it like horizontal is vertical, vertical is horizontal, it isn't. And I guess I want this to be horizontal. Yeah, so I've just made a nifty rectangular section. Not too fancy. I could have also done it with a different tool. I could have used a straight slot, and I could have picked from there to there, and I could have made that. Either way. Now, with those, I then could take them and make multiple copies of them. So I could just copy them, which would actually be kind of silly. I could use this linear sketch pattern tool in Sketch, which would work. But I found that that's actually clunky, and I'll show you a slightly better way to do it. But before I finish up, I'm just going to put some non-sharp corners on that. I'm going to make it 0.5 millimeters again, just so that I don't have to edit this after the fact. There. It's these levels of detail that really make the difference between a part that you can manufacture and use versus one that is not quite there. There. So I've cut these slots. I'm going to make this into essentially a grid opening for the temperature sensor and humidity sensor. So I don't want to just have those 2 slots. That's not enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select that cut, and in terms of features, I'm going to go up and go linear pattern here, and I'm going to pick that edge for the direction, and you can see it's already thinking what I want to do ahead. I want way more than just 2 of them, and I want way tighter spacing than 10 millimeters. 5 millimeters, that might be too tight. Let's say 6 millimeters. Whoops. That looks about right. It's gone too far off into space though. So I probably don't want 6. There. That's pretty good. Now I've got a cutaway for my LED for a light, and I've got these cutaways for my temperature sensor. And the only other thing I might want is I probably am going to need to plug in something so I can connect with the Arduino computer that's in there. And so I'm going to cut another hole in the side of this. Now, I'd like to know where that is going to be, and that becomes a problem. And the way to solve that is to think about how you're actually fitting this together. Now, in my case, I want the lid to fit on top of the other part. So I'm going to finish with that. And rebuild. And I'm going to go to the other part. And I'll hide this. And the last thing I'll do before I'll leave you on your own to play with this is I'm going to put in some standoffs so that the electronics component that I'm going to have is at a height where I know it'll rest. So what I will do there is I will edit this part, edit part, and I'm going to do an extruded base off of that bottom bit. And all I'm going to do is extrude a couple of circles. And unless I have a particular reason for this to be in a particular place according to the electronics board that I'm putting in here, I can pick those wherever I want them to go. Before I'm done with them, however, I'm going to put some holes in the middle of them because I'd kind of like to make sure I can pin my part in place. And I could do these also with a pattern, but I'm not. There. And so now it's already chosen the contours. It knows that I want to have hollow things, and I want this standoff to be not 11 millimeters, but I want it to be 4 millimeters. So they're just going to hold the electronics board up high enough, like so. Before I'm done, I'm going to fill it, because we can't have sharp corners on parts or they crack, especially 3D printing. And there we've got something for the electronics to rest on. So if that surface there is the place where the electronics board is, then if I look at my electronics, I will find that the location where I'm going to have the plug-in USB port will be reference to that. So I'm going to, before I'm finished, make one more cut. I'm going to make a cut on this end, and it will be like so. I'll dimension that. And the only reason it didn't give me the same dimension is because it didn't have any constraints on the shape of this this rectangle. And I want to make that dimension from there to there. Oh, it thinks it wants to be an angle. I don't want an angle. Let's try that again. I want from that surface to that point. And if I look at my components, I know that has to be 2 millimeters. And so that locates where that cut is going to be. And the cut is going deep enough, so we should be good. Oh, didn't like that. Why didn't it like that? So sometimes it tells you 0 thickness. There's something wrong with what it thinks I'm trying to cut. Often it's just going in the wrong direction. No, didn't like that either. I'm just going to increase the thickness. No, this would result in 0 thickness geometry. Well, that's weird. Oh, I think I know. It's because where I put the edge of that, you can see it's really close to this edge. And so it's going to complain about how that cut works with regards to that edge. So I may have to change the geometry, and I can try that. If I exit this, it saves the sketch. I'm going to make that 4.5. Yeah. I'm going to make that horizontal. And I'm going to make that horizontal. And I'm going to make that vertical. I didn't like that. Sometimes SolidWorks is not your friend. There. And sometimes it is. Back to that cut. There. So it didn't like the fact that I had a tiny, tiny surface edge there. I had to either go up or down, and I chose to cut it more. So there we have it. Obviously, you can spend a lot more time playing with little details like this, but it's these little details that will make a part such as this to be much, much more realistic and more manufacturable. So I'm going to leave it there, and good luck. Try and modify the box you made from last time into something you really could print and use. Thanks for listening.